I'm coming to you live from Jerusalem tonight, and I hope that the signal is clear and that the shir can proceed in the best possible way. So one slight limitation is that I don't have my Art Scroll Stone Chumash with me, and so I won't be able to give you the page there, but it's easy enough to find. We're starting at the beginning of Parshas Pinchas, which is chapter 25 in the book of Numbers. Not from the beginning of the chapter, but I'm sure you see it already in whatever Chumash you're using. So it starts with chapter 25, Pasuk Yud, Yud Aleph. Vayera Adonai Moshe lemar, Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aharon HaKohen heshivas chamasi. This particular person who we already met last week, Pinchas, the son of Elazar, the son of Aaron HaKohen, turned back my anger, me'al b'nei Yisrael b'kanos kinsi b'socham, when he avenged my vengeance in their midst. Of course, the reference here is to the narrative that preceded this immediately, where it was Pinchas who rose to the occasion, who saw that a Jewish man, a prince of the tribe of Shimon, was publicly consorting with the Midianite princess, and he was setting, needless to say, a very bad example for the other Jewish people who evidently followed in his trail. And as a result, Pinchas felt the need to take vigilante action, which he did. He carried out an execution, extrajudicial execution, for which he is praised. And as we see here, the Torah says that he has turned back my anger, and I did not destroy the children of Israel in my anger. So the fact that Pinchas punished the guilty parties had the effect of sparing many others who possibly were also guilty, but the wrath against the Jewish people could have extended even further. But what I want to explore is the remarkable and possibly unique phenomenon of the broken letter Vav in the word Shalom. That's the next passage. Lachein emor, therefore declare. Hineni nosein lo esprisi Shalom. Behold, I am giving him my covenant of peace. Now, the word Shalom has an unusual feature in that the Vav in the word Shalom is written Ketia, Vav Ketia. That means that the Vav is somehow defective. There are three traditions as to the way that the Vav should be written to reflect its defectiveness. One is that it's a miniature Vav. Another is that it is cut off. That is to say, it's like a normal letter Vav, and the shape is going to be significant. We'll get to that in a moment. But there's a gap in between. Within the letters, like if you write a numeral 1 and you write it in such a way that the first part of the numeral is a vertical line, but the second part is also vertical, but there's a gap in between them. So that's Vav Ketia, cut off Vav. In other words, the Vav is there, but it's not quite whole. It has a gap within it. And the third possibility is that the Vav is written in the usual size, but it doesn't extend down to the line. So it's written like a Yud, like an extended Yud, somewhere between a Yud and a proper Vav. That is to say, the top part of it is the normal part. The first stroke of ink downward is in the usual way, but it does not extend all the way to the line in the way of the writing. But that's just a technicality. That is to say, the particular way in which the Vav Ketia is formed is subject to this discussion. But they all agree that there is when I say they all agree, there is definitely an ancient Masoretic tradition of the Vav Ketia. It is defective in some way. So the Gemara has a certain drash about it, but of course we're going to consider Bal haTurim. And he says, Shnei Psukim, no, I'm sorry, Bal haTurim says, Davar Acher, because he has a few comments along the way. He says, Vav Ketia ki Pinchas hu Eliyahu. This is a broken Vav, and the reason is here Bal haTurim cites a well-known tradition, which is actually not found in the Talmud. It is found in the important Midrashic collection known as Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. It is found further in more than one place in the Zohar, and interestingly, Rashi and Bava Metzia also refers to it, and that is the tradition Pinchas zu Eliyahu, that Pinchas and Eliyahu are one and the same. Either it means that Eliyahu was a descendant of Pinchas, but it probably means more than that, because anyone can be a descendant of an ancient hero, and it doesn't mean he is the same as that biblical hero. So probably it means that he either is the same person and he lived an extraordinarily long life, or it could be, and this is again maybe closer to I won't say the pshat exactly, but another alternative is that he is a Gilgul, he is a reincarnation, that the soul of Pinchas returned centuries later in the person of Eliyahu Hanavi. But there is some kind of continuity, some kind of identification of Pinchas and Eliyahu. Says the Baal HaTurim that interestingly, and this comment of Baal HaTurim is also found in Rashi, not here, but Rashi quotes in B'chukosai, where we find the following observation, again, part of the Masoretic tradition. The name Yaakov is spelled always without a vav. It appears in the Torah, I would say innumerable times, but it has been numbered. If a person is exacting or use a computer program, you can find out exactly how many times the name Yaakov appears in the Torah or all of Tanakh. All of the times that it appears, the name Yaakov is without a vav. It's chaser vav. Yaakov is spelled chaser vav, with exception of 5. There are 5 places where the name Yaakov is spelled with a vav, but it's very unusual. Corresponding to that, we find that Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu, the name Eliyahu appears many times, not as many as Yaakov, but he was, of course, an important figure in the book of Kings. So the name Eliyahu appears many times. 5 times the name Eliyahu is written chaser vav, without the vav. Instead of Eliyahu, it's just written Eliyah. Eliyah is a short
as the
vav. There's Rashi in the Baal HaTurim refers to it. The 5 times, the 5 instances of the letter vav in the name Yaakov were, so to speak, taken or borrowed from Eliyahu, and therefore Eliyahu became only Eliyah. What's the symbolism? Of course, Eliyahu Hanavi, according to our tradition, is the harbinger of the redemption. Eliyahu, so to speak, represents the messianic hope, the messianic conviction. That's why the fact that Eliyahu did not die in the way that other people have died, but rather he ascended to heaven in a whirlwind, as is narrated in the book of Kings. So that is a way of alluding to the idea that somehow Eliyahu Hanavi is still here. He's still will return to earth, and he will be the one to herald the redemption. So says the Baal HaTurim, the word, the vav katia, this broken vav here, alludes to the fact that Eliyahu, alludes to the fact that Pinchas is Eliyahu, and Eliyahu his name is supposed to be with a vav at the end, but in 5 instances the name Eliyahu appears without the vav, and the name Yaakov appears 5 times with the vav, because Yaakov has, so to speak, borrowed or almost impounded the letter Vav from Eliyahu 5 times in order to ensure, to sort of be a security so that Eliyahu Hanavi will come and redeem the Jewish people. The Maharal says something very beautiful, that the letter Vav is thin and slender. It's like a hand, like the hand, I'm sorry, not a hand, but the finger. It's like a finger. A hand has 5 fingers. The 5 letters Vav represent like a handshake. A handshake is a way of expressing a commitment, a mutual bond in which Eliyahu and Yaakov, so to speak, shake on it, in which Eliyahu has surrendered his hand to Yaakov. Or to put it differently, I would like to say that Yaakov holds the hand of Eliyahu Hanavi, stretches forth across the generations to bring Eliyahu to redeem the Jewish people, represented by Yaakov himself. So again, to sum up, Baal HaTurim says the broken Vav symbolizes the fact that the Vav in Eliyahu is missing in 5 occasions, and that itself is the guarantee that he will come to redeem the Jewish people. Says the Baal HaTurim, Ad shavo im hamashiach v'yigal es banav, until Eliyahu comes with the Redeemer, with Mashiach, and redeems the sons of Yaakov. He adds on, v'zehu yagel Yaakov yismach Yisrael. Yaakov will rejoice, Jacob will exalt, Israel will rejoice. So Yismach is Osios Mashiach. Says Baal HaTurim, she'yismach limos HaMashiach, v'yachzir havav v'yehei Eliyahu shalem. That Yaakov will rejoice. It says, I'm sorry, Yagel Yaakov, Yaakov will exult when he returns the letters Vav to Eliah, and he becomes Eliyahu once more, and he will be the one to bring about joy to Israel. Yismach Yisrael Osios Mashiach, the same letters as the word Mashiach. And then lastly, Baal HaTurim adds on that the word shalom, I'll give you my covenant of peace, begematria zehu Mashiach. The word shalom, which has gematria 376, is the same gematria as zehu Mashiach. So we have here these hints that I'll give you my covenant of peace. It refers to the ultimate peace, the peace that will be ushered in the Messianic era, according to the tradition that Pinchas is Eliyahu, and of course Eliyahu is the Redeemer. I just want to add on an idea of my own, if I may, and that is that the broken Vav symbolizes the gap where the Vav has the function of bringing things together. It's called a conjunctive. It's associated with the English word and. So a Vav is something which links the word that follows it with the word that precedes it. It's a conjunctive. And the word Vav means a clasp. And the letter Vav is written like a clasp. If you think about it, it's written in a way, it's not just a straight line. That might be how we write it in cursive, but like in a Torah scroll or in a more formal form of script, the Vav is written with a little head at the top as well. It's like a clasp. It's like a hook, which is a straight, let's say, piece of metal or material or wood with a clasp at the top. So the letter Vav and the word Vav and the function of the Vav is to join things together. What is it? What's the symbolism of a gap in the Vav? The gap in the Vav means that there is some emptiness, there's some void where there should be continuity, there should be joining together, but there's a gap. How do we know? What is the source of the well-known tradition that we've been talking about for the last few minutes, that Eliyahu will be the harbinger of the redemption? Because the pasuk says at the end of the book of Malachi, it's the Haftarah 4, Shabbos Hagadol, Hinei Anochi Sholeach Lachem Es Eliyahu Hanavi, behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet, Lifnei Bo Yom Hashem Hagadol V'Hanorah, before the great and awesome day of God arrives. That refers to the Messianic era. V'heshiv lev avos al banim v'lev banim al avosam. He will restore the hearts of the fathers to the children and the children to the fathers. In other words, Eliyahu Hanavi will be the one to close the generation gap. When I was young, very young, which goes back quite some time, there was a lot of talk, I'm talking about the 1960s and 70s, when I was growing up, about the generation gap. The generation gap, I don't think, was unique to that generation. It probably has been perceived as such many times throughout human history, perhaps frequently, perhaps generally throughout human history. But in any case, there was a feeling that the older generation are out of touch, and there's a generation gap. That, in Jewish terms, was certainly the case, in which there was a steady and sometimes precipitous, sometimes calamitous collapse of Jewish observance and Jewish commitment and Jewish identity and Jewish practice from one generation to the next. We have witnessed in our own lifetimes the closing of that gap. I'm not saying entirely by any means, but a scenario, a phenomenon in which the hearts of the fathers are inspired by the children. And Rashi, in his commentary to Tanakh, says, Al Yedei Banim, that the hearts of the fathers will be restored to their Father in heaven through the children. The children will inspire the fathers. So what we have here is the symbolism of the letter Vav, which is broken as representing the era that will usher in the messianic times, in which the fathers are inspired by the children, in which the generation gap has actually been reversed. Not only are the children as devoted as the fathers, but maybe more so, and that they will be the ones who inspire the father. This subject could be expanded upon into a whole lecture, but that's our shira, but that's not our subject tonight because we need to go on. So this is what haTurim says about Brisi Shalom. And the next pasuk, pasuk Yud Gimel. So he says, "V'haisa lo ulazor acharav bris kunas olam tachas asher kinei le'eloha vayichaper al bnei Yisrael." Vayichaper, it does not say v'chiper, and he atoned. It's describing what happened, what Pinchas did. It says, I'll just read the English, it shall be for him and his offspring after him a covenant of eternal priesthood, because he took zealous vengeance for his God, and he brought atonement to the children of Israel. This is what Pinchas did. But the word vayichaper also has the meaning of the future. Vayichaper, he will atone. So says the haTurim that there's a remez here. It does not say lechaper or v'chiper, but it says vayichaper, emphasizing, at least as a possible understanding or possible interpretation, that he will in the future atone for the Jewish people. So says the haTurim, she'omeinu mechaper al Yisrael ad sof kol hadoros. He continues, he remains active in the process of atoning for the Jewish people ad sof kol hadoros, until the end of all generations. Now, I think, although the haTurim doesn't say it explicitly, but as we have seen always, he tends to be very tends to be very Spartan in his language. And I believe that he is also in this comment following on from the Pinchas is Elijah equivalency, in which the Chazal say that Pinchas did not only live and die in early antiquity, but he also either became or came back as Eliyahu HaNavi, and Eliyahu HaNavi himself also did not die, and Eliyahu HaNavi will be the one to not only be the harbinger of redemption, that we discussed in the first half of our shiur, but Eliyahu HaNavi will also be the witness to the fact that the Jewish people retain their faithfulness to the Jewish tradition and to their Jewish heritage. And the background to this is that Elijah, the prophet, in his prophetic career, in his lifetime, was very embittered. He was very disillusioned. And he said to God, I'm dramatizing it a bit and perhaps slightly certainly simplifying it. I'm resigning my commission. The Jewish people have betrayed the covenant. The Jewish people have repeatedly fallen prey to the worship of the Baal. And as much as I denounce them, seek to inspire them, demonstrate miraculous divine intervention, it's of no help, and therefore I'm giving up. I'm resigning my commission. Hashem says it doesn't work that way. It's a lifetime appointment. You don't have the option of resigning your commission. Besides which, as a prophet, your job is to rebuke the Jewish people. Your job is to say to the Jewish people, Hashem says you can do much better and you must do better. I don't engage you for the purpose of your complaining to me about the Jewish people. You're supposed to rebuke the Jewish people to the Jewish people. on my instruction. I don't need you to come and denounce the Jewish people and come to me and tell me what a irredeemable lot they are. That's not how it works. Moreover, I will demonstrate, or I will place you in an eternal position to testify to the fact that the Jewish people have not betrayed the covenant. And this is the basis for the tradition that Eliyahu is the Malach HaBris. He is present at a circumcision. We have a Kisei of Eliyahu, and symbolically we associate the Brit Milah with the conviction of Eliyahu Hanavi that the Jewish people are the parties to the covenant and must uphold the covenant. And because Eliyahu Hanavi suggested that the Jewish people have betrayed the covenant, therefore Hashem says, you will be present at every bris, and you will be a witness to see for yourself that the Jewish people, they may be wayward in many fashions, they may fall short in innumerable ways, they may be deserving of punishment, but don't say that they have betrayed the covenant, because you'll see that they will uphold it. And every male boy, every male child will be circumcised on the 8th day, or soon thereafter as circumstances may allow. And it is notable that even at this late date in Jewish history, it remains the case that all but the very most assimilated Jewish families still perform the ritual of circumcision. They may not do it in the very best halachically correct manner, but it remains a feature of Jewish life that continues to define the Jewish people and to characterize the Jewish people, and therefore we say that Eliyahu Hanavi will be the one to witness it, and that's Vayichaper ad sof kol hadoros. There's another time in our tradition where Eliyahu Hanavi is present, and of course you know that's at the Seder Leil Pesach. Once again, Eliyahu is summoned. Of course, at the simple level, at the sort of well-known level, it alludes to the redemption. We are recalling the redemption from Egypt, and we are anticipating the future redemption symbolized by Eliyahu Hanavi. That's true. I'm not disputing that, but there's a deeper reason. The deeper reason is that Eliyahu Hanavi is the one who questioned whether the Jewish people are faithful, and therefore it is the destiny of Eliyahu Hanavi to be present at every Seder, metaphysically, to observe the fact that the Jewish people do fulfill the mitzvah, the imperative, v'higadata levincha, you will tell your son about the redemption from Egypt. And again, this also, the Haggadah, the Seder, the Pesach Seder remains a Jewish practice which is found nearly universally in Jewish homes, even those that are very distant from Jewish practice and observance, and has to say from Jewish fealty. But nevertheless, they respect or they cling to this, and again, they often distort it, but some form of a Pesach Seder remains a characteristic of the Jewish people, even at this late date. And I think that is what the Baal haTurim is alluding to when he says, Vayechaper Omeid Mechaper ad sof kol hadoros, until the end of all generations. The Baal haTurim says one last interesting comment that I want to share with you. We find that a little bit later in the Seder, Pasuk Yud Zayin, actually it's not very much later at all, it's only a few verses later. In Pasuk Yud Zayin, Saror es hamidanim v'hikisem osam. So Hashem says to Moshe, Saror, which means to antagonize or harass the Midianites, v'hikisem osam, and you shall strike them. So the Baal haTurim makes a very simple observation, which, as is often the case, I had not noticed. Saror is in the singular. Now, the truth is it can be used as the plural as well, but it certainly sounds like it's in the singular, and that's how the Baal haTurim puts it. The Baal haTurim says, Lashon Yachid. Then the second half of this short verse, V'hikisem osam, is in the plural. So again, Hashem says to Moshe, Saror Samidanim, which could be understood as Hashem instructing Moshe specifically. Now, probably the meaning is that Moshe should act on behalf of the Jewish people. He's the leader of the Jewish people. But nevertheless, it is notable that the word Saror is in a form that could be understood as referring to Moshe specifically. The second half says, V'hikisem osam. The pasuk could have said, Sarasem idanim v'hikisa osam, and you shall strike them. Again, and we would understand that Moshe, representing the Jewish people, leading the Jewish people, will be the one to carry out this divine command. But the Torah doesn't say that. The Torah says v'hikisem in the plural, which means that the singular and the plural are not, let's say, naturally aligned as we would expect, and that again requires an explanation. haTurim has an interesting idea here. He says that the leading sort of weapon that the Midianites used against the Jewish people to bring about their downfall, that is to say, the harm to the Jewish people, was this particular girl, this princess, this daughter of Tsur, Kazvi Bas Tsur. She was the one who was consorting with Zimri ben Salu, as the Torah describes. And evidently, as we said, many others followed her example, followed his example, and that's brought the Jewish people to the situation of moral turpitude and the plague that resulted as a consequence, and 24,000 men died. Says the haTurim, quoting the Gemara, or based on the Gemara in Sanhedrin, that her father said to her, when you go and try to seduce the Jewish men, don't just pick up any commoner, any layman. See if you can seduce, if you can lead into sin the greatest of them. Who is that? Moshe Rabbeinu. I'll just read you a few words. haTurim says, that the reason it says Sarar, that Hashem, so to speak, addressed the Jewish people, addressed Moshe as if in the singular, ki al yadcha haya, because her father said to her, Alti ba'ali el legadol shebehem, seek out the leading one amongst them. Now, this guy from the tribe of Shimon, he was like maybe the prince, or maybe a sort of sub-prince. We don't know exactly who he was. According to Chazal, actually, he was Shelumiel. But in any case, Zimri ben Salu was a prominent person, and he convinced her, probably because of his own desire for her affection, or her attention at least, no matter affection, he convinced her that I'm also a leader, I'm also a prince, I'm also one of the heads of the tribe, so you don't have to go after Moshe. Perhaps she tried and failed with Moshe. The point is that this was a kind of targeted assassination. She was their leading weapon, and her objective, her intention was to seduce Moshe Rabbeinu himself. Now, I'm not saying Moshe would have succumbed, but that was her objective, which means that Moshe was the target, as I said, like a targeted assassination. So therefore, Moshe had good reason to personally be resentful and to personally lead the charge against the Midianites. And even if Moshe is going to outsource it or something like that, which he did, we'll get to that in one moment, but Moshe has a particular gripe or particular reason to feel aggrieved, because he was the target of this effort. Why didn't Moshe lead the campaign? He led the campaign against Sichon and Og, but he did not lead the military campaign against Midian. Says the haTurim, Kisem, Lashon Rabim, v'lo Moshe, not Moshe, but rather everyone else, and it was Yoshua who led the battle. Why? Kinis gadel b'Midian. Says the haTurim, Rashi mentions it as well, that Moshe was raised in Midian. I mean, he was raised actually in the palace of the Pharaoh, but then when he fled, he grew to maturity, and he grew to greatness, and ultimately he experienced the prophetic encounter at the burning bush through his time in Midian. And of course, as we know, he married the daughter of Yitro, who was a Midianite priest, until he abandoned idolatry and joined the Jewish people. The point is that Moshe was a beneficiary of Midian, and therefore it's not right that Moshe should lead the campaign against Midian. And I always think when I come across this idea, I always recall how Lady Jacobowitz, the late Lady J, some of you may remember her, once spoke for us at Kesher years and years ago. And she recounted some of her own personal history, her own personal biography. And it was at the same time in the late 1990s of the scandal about Swiss profiteering in the Holocaust, where Swiss banks and insurance companies were found to be sitting on literally hundreds of millions of dollars of unclaimed bank accounts and assets and unpaid and insurance policies that were never paid out because their victims could not prove that they had died. And the Germans were not accustomed to issuing death certificates. And for this reason, and in a cynical and deliberate manner, the Swiss profiteered from the Holocaust, and not just in that regard, in other regards as well. And there was a lot of talk about it, and a lot of sort of feeling that the Swiss government and people and banks have to make a reckoning and be called to account. And they made a certain limited payment, and you may or may not recall that. Lady Jacobowitz said that although the Swiss profiteering in the Holocaust, if it's proven, and in many cases it was proven, is morally execrable, but she said, I cannot participate in the campaign of denouncing the Swiss because I owe my life to the Swiss. And she related how, as a young girl, she was smuggled across the French-Swiss border. She described it in great detail. Now's not the time to review it, but she said that at a certain moment, she heard a Swiss border guard say, "You're safe, you're now in Switzerland." They had managed to get across the border, and although they did not necessarily enjoy the pleasures of the Swiss hospitality, the way a banking magnate might, but they survived. And she said she owes her life to the Swiss, and therefore she would not denounce them. She was not exonerating them either, but she said, I cannot participate in this campaign of vilification because I owe my life to the Swiss. That's the same thing here as well. So it says tsarar because Moshe was a particular target of this Midianite, how's it say? Try to choose my words carefully. I'm a bit too tired, so I don't want to risk it. Anyway, this Midianite woman, Moshe was a target, and therefore it's sarar, but he keeps him in the plural because actually Moshe himself did not participate in the campaign because years and years before, in an earlier chapter of his life, he owed his success and his stability to the fact that the Midianites took him in when he himself was an Egyptian refugee. Okay, we'll stop here. So thank you to everybody for listening. And I'm sorry if I'm not entirely coherent tonight. We are live from Jerusalem, and I didn't sleep too much last night in the flight from Heathrow to Israel, landing just before 5 a.m. Israel time. Anyway, have a wonderful Shabbos, and thank you to next week. We won't be in session because I'm actually flying back to London next Thursday, and I'm going to be in transit during the time that we normally have our shir. So we won't be in session next week, but B'ezrat Hashem, we will be the following week, and that will be the finale for the summer season. So we won't be here next Thursday, but B'ezrat Hashem, in 2 weeks' time, I'll see you again.